Luke chapter 5, verses 15 through 16 from the NIV. Yet the news about him spread all the more. Or I'll read it this way. But now, even more, the report about him went abroad, and great crowds gathered to hear him, and he healed their infirmities. But he would withdraw to desolate places and pray. And the NIV said, Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. So the word there for lonely places was the Greek word eremos, and it was this desolate place, this solitary place, this quiet place. And so picture Jesus in the busyness of his ministry would have to take the time and intentionally make a choice to walk out of the city, who knows how far. Like imagine having to walk out of Taipei to a place that you could say is desolate or quiet. That's hard. But he made this a consistent habit of what he did as part of his life. And so we've been talking about the spiritual discipline of solitude, that our rabbi practiced solitude, and if we want to follow in the footsteps of our rabbi, we also should consider this practice of solitude. And I'll just define it this way. Solitude is the intentional time to quiet ourselves with God. Okay, it's the intentional time to quiet ourselves with God. And we talked about noise pollution being one of the greatest causes, one of the greatest health risks in our generation is noise pollution. So we need to find a way and build up a habit to get away and just have quiet ourselves with God. Right? The problem is there's two sources of noise. One is external and one is internal. Right? There's external noise all around us, whether that's media or people in our ears, but there's also the internal noise of our inner thoughts. So a few months ago, or maybe about a month ago, my wife thought it would be a good idea for me to get away on a personal retreat. And so I went to Jiaoxi wanting to just kind of get away, decompress, but also to plan the year's sermon schedule, right? And so I got to Jiaoxi after work, and I sat in this hotel room. Of course, there's like a hot springs bathtub in there, and when I got there, right, it was really easy to silence the external noise. I couldn't hear the traffic outside. All I had to do was turn off the TV. I just had to put my phone away and not look at my phone. So the external noise was really easy. But I have to admit, the internal noise, the stuff going on in my head, that was extremely difficult. My thoughts just have a tendency to run wild, and I couldn't for the life of me, quiet that thought. So, I went in the hot springs thinking that would relax me. It didn't, right? And so it's such a difficult thing to find this time, an intentional time, even though I thought I had it, to quiet ourselves before God. So I want to just preface this by acknowledging that solitude is actually a really scary thing. And a really difficult thing, because when we're in solitude, we don't have what psychologists call the social and cultural narcotics to distract us. There's not the entertainment, the work to distract us, travel, media, things that help us to avoid thinking too much about what's actually going on inside of us. And when we enter times of solitude, we have to look at ourselves. And sometimes it's scary, and sometimes it's ugly. You can look in a mirror, and you can see all these flaws, but guess what? You have the choice to look away. And I think a lot of times we enter maybe there's a thought that wants to see the ugliness in us, but we don't want to look at that. Or we want a thought that wants to look at our life as it is, but it's scary to look at our life as it is. So what do? We go to the narcotics of media. We go to the narcotics of work. We go to the narcotics of friendships and conversations and outings and travel to avoid looking in the mirror at what's really there. But when you're in solitude, when you're in a quiet, desolate place, and there's nothing else around, you are in a room full of mirrors. And unless you close your eyes, you're going to come to a point where you have no choice but to look at the real you and what is actually going on inside, and that's scary. Henry Nouwen, a renowned Catholic theologian, says this: solitude is not a private therapeutic place. That's what I expected. I thought when I went away to this quiet room in Jiaoxi that it would be therapeutic. It was not. Here's what he says. Rather, it's the place of conversion, the place where the old self dies and the new self is born, the place where the emergence of the new man and the new woman occurs. In solitude, I get rid of my scaffolding. I have no friends to talk to, no telephone calls to make, no meetings to attend, no music to entertain, no books to distract, just me. Naked, vulnerable, weak, sinful, deprived, broken, nothing. It is this nothingness that I have to face in my solitude, a nothingness so dreadful that everything in me wants to run to my friends, my work, my distractions. Solitude is the furnace of transformation, the place of great struggle and great encounter. The struggle against the compulsions of the false self and the encounter with the loving God who offers himself as the substance of the new self. Solitude is not relaxing. I thought it was. It's actually scary because of what we encounter. So in these seasons, in the next few weeks, we're going to talk about those encounters. And the 3 encounters are going to be with ourselves, with the enemy, and with God. So here's what happens when you get alone in a quiet place with God. Hebrews 4:12-13. For the word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of soul and spirit, of joints and of marrow, and discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart. No creature is hidden from his sight, but all are naked and exposed to the eyes of him to whom we must give account. So when we truly get alone with God, when we get to a place where we allow him to speak, his truth speaks to our lives, but that truth is going to expose the thoughts and intentions of our heart. That truth is not going to allow us to hide behind the facade that we put in front of people or the facade that we convince ourselves. That truth is going to expose us naked before God and before ourselves. And sometimes the thoughts and intentions of the heart are not great. And so the context of today's message has to do with the daily exercise of solitude. And I've been trying in the mornings, just get away maybe for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, just in solitude, but also an extended period of solitude. There's actually an organization that sets up a 21-day of solitude for pastors. And you go in the woods, all you bring is a pen and a journal. No Bible, or maybe a Bible, but, right? Nothing, no podcast to listen to, nothing. It's just you, your thoughts, and God. That's it. So I would encourage us, I know as busy as we are, to consider maybe it's something we want to do. Not 21 days, mind you, but maybe 2 or 3 days or a weekend. So what do we encounter when we come to this solitary, quiet place with God? What happens? Well, what happens, what I experience, is we feel things. We experience what's called, by Thomas Keating, the unloading of the unconscious. We experience the things that were actually down below, but we haven't had time to look at, but now in solitude, those things start to bubble up. Christian psychologist Larry Crabb has this paradigm of who we are called the iceberg analogy, if we could put up the iceberg. So at the very surface of the iceberg is the managed life. It's the life where we are in control. It's the life where we feel successful. It's the life where we feel good and we look good. And because it's managed, we bring it to the surface and we display it to the world. But what inevitably happens is as we go through life, we get hurt, we get betrayed, we get rejected, we get let down, and we actually slip to what's called the wounded life. That life is ugly. That life is painful. We don't want to show that. So when we get down to the wounded life, the hurt, the pain, the disappointments, our thought is, how can I get back up to the managed life? How can I be in control again? How can I feel good again? How can I feel successful again? And we panic like we're drowning. But what we're actually going to see today is the way that we grow in solitude with Christ is not to panic in the wounded life, but to go down into it. Not to try to rescue ourselves and get back to the managed life so we can present this version of ourselves that feels successful and in control, but to actually dive down into the hurt, into the pain, into the ways that we feel out of control and let Christ into what's really below the surface, which for most of us, actually is a lot of us, the wounded life, and go down into it. So what do we feel when we experience seasons of solitude? What is in that wounded life? First thing I'll just say is we feel exhaustion. We feel exhaustion. There's sort of this crash. If you're like me, I sort of live by this mantra in my head, which I know is unhealthy. I say, we'll rest when we're dead. right? I say that all the time. When I take people hiking, we'll rest at the top, right? Just keep going, keep going, keep going. And sometimes I live life that way, and I don't realize I'm tired, but until I get into a time of solitude, then that time of solitude is the first breath. And I go, and I actually experience my body. And I experience what my mind is really going through, and I experience what my spirit is actually feeling. And I have to admit, it's exhaustion. Adrenaline keeps us going, right? The problem solving I have at my job, the crisis management I have to do at my job, the things that are going on at church, there's adrenaline there. Go, 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 go. And sometimes that adrenaline helps to fool us to thinking we're okay when really we're exhausted. I remember in high school PE, we ran a mile, and you get that runner's high, right? That's adrenaline, right? And so after the mile, I told my PE teacher, I'm going to run some more. Not realizing that was just chemicals in my brain and my body fooling me into thinking I wasn't tired. And then halfway into it, I regretted it. I'm like, what am I doing? And I think that time of solitude I had in Jiaoxi, and times where I've just had a time to breathe, I just feel the fatigue, exhaustion. I didn't know it because there was the adrenaline of distraction, right? In 1 Kings, Elijah, running away from Jezebel, probably. That seems to be all he's doing. In verse 4 says, but he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, the quiet place, the desolate place, Eremos, and came and sat down under a broom tree, and he asked that he might die, saying, it is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers. And he lay down and slept under a broom tree, and behold, the angel touched him and said, arise. And do you just feel the exhaustion? Feel the exhaustion. If you're a Star Wars fan, there's this great meme going around of, when Yoda slowly died. And it's like, as a parent, I now understand why Yoda died, because Luke kept asking questions. And so it's like, when my kids ask questions, I'm just like, exhausted. And I just fade away, right? There's a spectrum of exhaustion, okay? There's good exhaustion that we feel, it's a little hard to see, at the end of a long week when we feel like we've done good things. And so it's a good tired because I put in energy into good things. There is an unhealthy exhaustion where it just comes from stress, or we're not sleeping enough, we're not eating well, it's a health-related thing. But there's actually a dangerous level of exhaustion where we're just like empty, where we have nothing. We lose touch with ourselves, we lose touch with God, and that's when we're actually really, really in a dangerous place. And so, when solitude brings us to a place of feeling exhaustion, it's a good thing because it's an invitation to do what? Rest. And maybe your body just needs rest. Maybe your mind just needs rest. Maybe your spirit just needs rest in God. One of the other things you're going to face in solitude is fear. Some of us are worriers. We worry a lot. This is me. I think about the what ifs. I think about the things that I'm not doing. I think about the responsibilities that are still there and not completed. I think about all the what ifs, and we have this fear. Here's how ridiculous it is. When I went into my time in Jiaoxi, you know what my fear was? My fear was, what if this is going to be a waste of time? What if I'm not going to get anything out of that? And so I was worried about the time. What if God doesn't speak to me? So many what ifs, right? This whole fear just coming out from what's inside and surfacing. Another thing you might feel as you enter a season of solitude is sadness. Seasons of solitude is actually a time to grieve, and if we were to think about it, everything in life to some extent is tinged with sadness. When my kids graduate, am I going to be happy? Heck yeah, but I'm going to be sad. When you complete a task, are you going to feel like celebrating? Yeah, but there's a little bit of sadness because that season of your life is done. There's a little bit of sadness, and sometimes we bottle it up, or we don't want it to ruin a good time, so we just suppress it, and it's down below in the wounded part of our life. I experienced this a couple years ago when I had a coworker pass away. And I was so busy managing the rescheduling, we had to rearrange the work, who's going to teach what. I had to deal with the memorial service, deal with hosting the family that came for that. I had no time to grieve, and I just suppressed it. And I had to really get away and go on a bike ride and just let myself feel sadness And that's okay. We feel like feeling sadness is a bad thing, but we got to feel it because it's there. I know this is not the most uplifting message, but I'm just warning you, okay? Another thing you might feel is anger. Anyone who has had these long seasons, whether you're thinking Henry David Thoreau or even Christian monks, they all talk about anger coming forth from their hearts. All the ones, the contemplatives, they write about how as they sit in silence, they get bitter. This bitterness at others comes up, where we replay the ways that people have offended us, or we rehearse arguments we're going to have with someone so that we could put them in their place. There's anger underneath, and that anger comes up, right? Past injustices we've experienced, anger at the current battles we're facing. But here, sometimes there's anger at God, where we would not want to admit, but it's there. God, why is my life like this? Or why didn't you answer this prayer? Or why did you answer this prayer in the way I didn't want you to answer this prayer? Why am I in the current state of my life? Why am I feeling this way? Why isn't things better? Why am I not more successful? There's anger with God. And you see it in Jeremiah, right? Look at Jeremiah chapter 15. He says, why is my pain unceasing, my wound incurable, refusing to be healed? Look at this. Will you be to me like a deceitful brook, like waters that fail? You think he was angry? The last thing is, or one of the other things, is shame. Like I said, we can't hide in solitude from ourselves. We're face to face with ourselves. We cannot look away from the mirror of who we are, stripped down, naked, exposed, who we really are. Listen, with other people, we can perform. We can perform and we can project to other people who we want them to think we are. And we can even fool ourselves in those moments to thinking we're that person we're trying to perform as. But in solitude, everything about us, our despair, our hurts, the good, the bad, the ugly, that's all there. And we realize how profound and broken we are. We realize how unpure our motivations are, and we have to face those things. Shame. I'm going to encapsulate this in one word, all these 5 things. I'm going to just call this pain. In solitude, we will encounter a lot of pain. Soren Kierkegaard says there's 2 types of people, those who are in despair and know it, and those who are in despair and don't know it. In solitude, we have no choice but to recognize that we are in pain. No matter how sunny your disposition is, no matter, you all have those smiley friends that feel like they've figured out life, there's pain. No matter how strong your faith is and how optimistic you are, there's pain. It's there. And we're going to encounter that. You read it all throughout Psalms, right? In Psalms, look at Psalm 6. I'm weary with my moaning. Every night I flood my bed with tears. I drench my couch with weeping. Does that sound like happiness or joy? That's pain. My eye wastes away because of grief. It grows weak because of all my foes. And obviously Job, right? Look at Job. I loathe my life. I would not live forever. Leave me alone, for my days are a breath, right? There's pain. The Bible does not shy away from people experiencing pain. We love to avoid it. We love to suppress it. We love to pretend it's not there, but it's there. And if we're to learn anything from our rabbi about the practice of solitude, it's that we actually don't run away from pain. Look at Matthew chapter 26, verse 36. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to the disciples, sit here while I go over there and pray. And taking with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. And he said to them, my soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me. And going a little further, he fell on his face and prayed, my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. Let me ask us, let's keep that up there. When Jesus practiced solitude, did he feel comforted? Did he feel encouraged? Did he feel at peace? That's what I thought was going to happen to me. I thought I was going to go away on a little personal retreat and I would come out encouraged and refreshed and at peace. But that's not the first thing I encountered. Look at what it says about him. He was sorrowful and troubled. He had sorrow even to death. It did not feel good to be in solitude for Jesus. But I want you to see, he leaned into it. He didn't deny it. He didn't try to keep it below the surface. He let it come to the surface, and he leaned into it, and he even said, God, let this cup pass from me. I don't want to go through this. He leaned into his pain. So what does he do? What can we learn from our rabbi? So he does three things. One of the things is he gives his feelings to God. Unfiltered, raw, uncut feelings. God, I feel this way. Do we pray like that? Or do we pray in a way that suppresses some of the painful, ugly feelings? Someone said prayer isn't a place to be good, it's a place to be real. And if you look at 2/3 of the Psalms are what we call laments. 2/3 of the Psalms are what we call laments. Laments is different than complaining. I just want to be clear. Complaining makes things worse. Lament has this trajectory where lament it goes down into the pain, and then it sort of meets with God in pain, and then it comes out with a new perspective of hope. There's this U-turn to lament. It dives into the pain. It doesn't disagree that it's there. It treats it as a reality. It pours it out before God, and then it emerges with this new perspective of hope despite the pain. Every one of the Psalms has that. That's classified as Psalm of Lament. It starts out horrible. Life sucks, God. I'm in so much pain, God. It dives into that, and then it discovers something in the fellowship with God and the outpouring of that pain. And then there's this hope that arises. There's always but you, God, are this. But you, God, will rescue me. That's the trajectory of the Psalms. But we got to give our feelings to God. We have to lean into the pain. Second thing that Jesus does is he gives God his desires. His desire is what? I don't want to do this. And the fact that I don't want to do this, but I feel like I have to do this, makes me feel sorrowful. Makes me feel anxious. Here's what's important. Our desires drive our feelings. If our feelings are here, what's actually under that is desire. Why do I get angry at my kids? Why do I feel anger at my kids? It's because my desire is for order. My desire is for comfort. My desire is for peace. And there's no way they give you that. So I get angry. Why do I get angry at this person? Because they stand in the way of my desire. I want that. You're preventing me from getting that. So I feel anger and bitterness towards you. So we have to give God not just our feelings, but our desires, because that's what actually drives our feelings. And why that's important is when we come face to face with the desires, when we put them out there, we actually get to see them for what they are. And sometimes, I'll be honest, those desires are not godly. Those desires are selfish. Those desires are self-centered. But unless we bring it to the forefront, we'll never realize that. Why do I feel this way? Well, it's because I want justice. Or I desire this for myself. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad, but we bring it before God. Psalm 139 says this, "Search me, O God, know my heart. Try me, know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." See, it's this, God, come in, dig around. What's in there might be ugly, but I give you permission to dig around. Do we give God permission to dig around? Or are we afraid of the dirt it's going to bring up, of the ungodly desires, of the ungodly feelings, right? I mean, feelings you can't help. But lastly, I want us to see that there's a good end because he gives God his trust. He gives God his trust. Right? What does he say? Not as I will, but as you will. He gives God his feelings, he gives God his desires, and he gives God his trust. Let me tell you something. Control is an illusion. Remember what we sang? Your ways are better. What do we think? Our ways are better. Control is an illusion. We think we can engineer the perfect outcome and the perfect life, but we fail to understand that so much is not in our hands. Control is an illusion. And the faster we can understand that, the more we can give our trust to God, the better off we're going to be to living the life He has called us to live. Sandra, can we put up that? Is there a slide for that? For trust? Oh, there isn't. Okay. So you give God His feelings, He gives God the desires, and He gives God His trust. And that's what we're called to do as we encounter ourselves in solitude. Let me say one last thing. Henry Nouwen said, "Solitude is the furnace of transformation. Without solitude, we will remain victims of our society and continue to be entangled in the illusion of the false self." If we don't spend time away and really encounter who we are, we're going to keep projecting who we want people to think we are. We're going to fool ourselves into thinking that's who we are without really encountering the real us that God ultimately knows anyway. Solitude is the furnace of transformation. So the picture I'm painting here is it's not going to be pretty because sometimes we think a retreat's going to be great. As a kid, I hated retreats because not only could you not sleep because everyone's talking all night, but you're tired, but you also have to just confront yourself. But I do want us to know that process is trying to get us to a point where we can be open with God and then ultimately put our trust in Him. So the questions we're going to reflect on as we connect are these. Have you tried to practice more intentional times of solitude in the past few weeks?